Hello and welcome to another episode of the Many Faces of Cancer podcast. I am your host, Melissa Grosboll, and joining me today is Mike Craycraft. And Mike was a registered pharmacist, and he suddenly went from healthcare provider to patient after receiving a testicular cancer diagnosis. He provides heartfelt insight into what it was like to remain silent about his diagnosis for 7 months, what it took to accept his condition, the importance of self-advocacy, and what it's like to really live after a cancer diagnosis. He founded the Testicular Cancer Society, is a mentor angel with Immerman Angels, a fourth angel mentor with the Cleveland Clinic, a research and community outreach fellow for the Male Wellness Collective, and a My Cancer Connection volunteer for the MD Anderson Cancer Center. So welcome to the show, Mike.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yes, this is quite a bio. I can't wait to dive into to all the things. But first, I want to start. If you guys are watching on YouTube, Mike has this wonderful picture behind his head that I just wanted you to share a little bit about that because it's very cool.
Oh, yeah. So I'm a bit of a Parrot Head or a Jimmy Buffett fan. And so, we did the whole fins up. Well, the picture behind me is a wave that looks like a fin, and the Bubbles, his song released after he passed away was called Bubbles Up. So it was kind of three things in one and had to get it. So love it.
So you got that after he passed?
Yeah.
Okay. And tell us how many shows that you've been to see of Jimmy Buffett.
I ended up with 99 shows in 6 different countries. So just one short of 100, and I'm one short of something else too. So.
Okay. Wonderful. I'm a huge Jimmy Buffett fan. Growing up in Florida, as you live part-time in Florida too, it's Jimmy Buffett's a big deal down there.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's dive in. So we have not had anybody on the show yet with testicular cancer. And when you and I talked before the show, you shared a lot. And so I really want to dive in. You were diagnosed like in 2006?
Yeah. So
yes.
It's been a little while.
You are almost 20 years cancer-free, which is fantastic. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about what was going on in your life. Like, you and I had talked previously that there's not really a test for testicular cancer, and testicular cancer is more of like a young men's cancer. So a lot of them, a lot of people don't even think to look. So kind of take us back to 2006 and what was going on when you found the lump.
Yeah, so I'm originally from Cincinnati, but in 2006 I was living down in South Florida, and it was just after Hurricane Wilma, and there's no power or AC, so everything's hot and the scrotum's more relaxed, and I just went to sit down on the couch. A friend of mine had called to see if I made it through the hurricane, and just adjusted myself and felt a lump, and immediately knew in my mind it was cancer, but I really didn't know anything about cancer. I mean, testicular cancer, I knew it existed. I knew Lance Armstrong had it. But that was about the breadth of my healthcare knowledge, unfortunately. So,
awesome. Well, not awesome, but I'm glad that you found it. So, how long did it take you to actually go and get it checked?
Well, that's where kind of the idiocracy came in. It only took me 7 months to get the nerve to go to the doctor. So, it kind of. I'll go to the doctor after this. I'll go after this. I didn't want to be coming home for Thanksgiving and say, hey, I have cancer and ruin the holidays. And then I ended up booking some trips and really lived like I was dying for the 7 months. But a little bit, it was kind of like 3 cogs. A little bit was, fear, I guess. A little bit was denial. And the biggest one was not wanting to upset others. I mean, how do you tell your friends and loved ones that you're sick and, possibly dying? And so that's really what kind of caused the delay.
Wow. I don't hear that very, very often. That's very altruistic to not want to freak out. Now, did you think that maybe it wasn't, or that it would just go away if you avoided it, or,
No. So I kind of put myself into an emotionally torturous state. By Thanksgiving, I'd convinced myself that I was going to pass away from metastatic disease, made peace with it. how I'd had a great life. I came home to Cincinnati for Thanksgiving and threw a party the day after Thanksgiving and didn't tell anyone why. But in my mind, it was my feeble attempt to see everyone one last time. And in a couple of months, they'd find out, my diagnosis and that I was going to die. So I didn't think it was going to go away. I thought I was, but.
Wow. Now, did you do any research about it during the 7 months, or you just kind of, it's not here, I'm going to die and that's it. So just have fun.
Yeah, unfortunately, I didn't do much at all to advocate for myself during those 7 months. Like I said, I lived like I was dying. If a friend at a beach bar said he was going snow skiing, I'd be like, can I go? And I'd be on the couch that weekend in Colorado skiing because everything was my last time, right? My last time to go skiing, my last time to do this or do that. And I really didn't do anything all the way up until just before my surgery to really learn anything about the disease or advocate for myself.
Now, what was the final straw or whatever that made you actually go in and finally see a doctor?
Well, like I said, I kept saying, well, after this, after New Year's, after my dad's 60th birthday, after this ski trip, I finally had a trip to go surfing in Costa Rica. And I wanted to learn how to surf and figured, if I passed away as a surfer, people would think I was cooler than I was. But that particular trip, I actually booked an appointment for 2 days after I got back. So I had to go once I got back. My parents paid for my college tuition. And part of me thought they're going to be really upset to find out that I just ended up passing away from something and never even getting diagnosed. So I better be smarter than I am and get into the doctor.
All right. And once you finally got in and got checked, did you have a good medical team that really explained things to you, explained what was going to happen, the prognosis, all of that kind of thing? Or did you still kind of go into a blind thinking you were going to die?
No. I was fortunate. I worked in the same medical center as my medical team. So I had access and privy to information that I think most patients don't. As a matter of fact, it was scary to me looking back, like, how do other people do this? I got into the urologist. He made a call while I was right there to the radiologist to reread the ultrasound. Yes, it looks like it's cancer. He said, I'll take the best care of you. I was like, I'm not going to die. He's like, no. I'm like, well, can I get some money back? Because I've been blowing a lot of it living like I was dying. But, I had the opportunity to, for example, I saw my order for my CT scan and it said I had hematuria or blood in the urine. That's not what I had. I had suspected testicular cancer. So I was able to go down to radiology and grab the radiologist and say, hey, would you read this different? And, they said, no, we'd be looking for all the same things, kind of. But yeah, let's sit down and look at it. So I could sit down with the radiologist. I could go into the pathology and ask him to reread my slides because there was a couple of little intricacies that was important to me. So I went from basically having my head in the sand to, having my head in stacks and stacks of medical literature. So
and everybody's business. Help me understand this. Help me understand this.
Yeah. If you were a medical oncologist walking down the hallway, you were getting what we call curbside by me. Hey, so if you had this patient that was, say, my age.
Look like me.
Yeah.
Have the same things as me.
Yeah. So I was very fortunate in that I had, one, most importantly, physicians that would work with me, and help, but then also have the access as well.
Okay. And so can you give us just a few stats about testicular cancer, like the prevalence, the age, the risks, just kind of in a nutshell, just some of the main points about it?
Yeah. So, it can occur at any age, but testicular cancer is a leading cause of cancer in those 15 to 35. You can even go 39 to 40, all the way out to 15 to 44, depending on how you break down the numbers. But basically, it's predominantly more of a younger person's disease. I've helped people, a mom with a 9-month-old and a 78-year-old on chemo in the hospital. So again, it can occur at any age. If it's caught in stage 1, it's almost 100% curable. And so that's, why it's so important to do your self-exams and to catch anything early. And then if you find something, don't be like me and sit on it, get in to see the doctor. there aren't any risk factors as far as that are modifiable. There aren't any activities or habits or lifestyles that cause testicular cancer. It's not caused by trauma or riding a bike. There is some hereditary to it, but it's not like breast cancer and where you have one, or major mutations. It's usually a plethora of them, but it is more inheritable than we originally thought. When I was diagnosed, we would say, no, it's not at all. But we know a little bit better now.
Okay. So did you have to go through like a lot of therapies? Was it, or treatments? Was it just surgery? Like what was kind of the protocol for that?
Yeah. So, I mean, despite my ignorance, I, was very fortunate, was diagnosed with stage 1 disease. And there's really kind of two main types of testicular cancer. I was diagnosed with seminoma, which is a slower growing type typically.
Okay.
So miraculously, I was still stage 1. And so the thought of stage 1 is it's just, limited to the testicle. You remove the testicle and you should be fine. Now, back then, the standard was to get 3 weeks of radiation therapy to make sure that no cells escaped. And then there was also, you could get a dose or two of carboplatin chemotherapy, which was more popular outside of the US at the time than here, just to make sure the cancer didn't come back. Or you could do active surveillance, which based on my kind of lazy personality, active surveillance seemed great. Would I just show up, every couple of months and get a CT scan, some blood work, and say hi to the doctor? And that's what I did. But there was kind of a lot of decision behind it. There's a saying, primum non nocere, first do no harm. And so I thought, well, if I don't have to do anything, that's what I should do. If it comes back, then I can treat it. I know 100% that I need treatment. And so I weighed my risk of relapse to that. It was also kind of funny. I don't say it very often, but my dad said, never get a tattoo. And so, with radiation, they'll mark you to line you up. And so I thought, well, is that what Dad was saying? Was he so prolific when I was in my teens? He thought I'd get some girl's name tattooed on my chest and then break up a week later. But and a lot of the research at the time on active surveillance was coming out of Toronto at Princeton's Margaret Hospital, and my sister's Margaret. So I thought, wow, man, maybe this is like bigger than my own thought capacity. And I'm going to go with active surveillance and steer away from radiation. I had the option, I guess that's the biggest key, is catching it early. I had an option. If it had spread, then I wouldn't have had the option. I would have either had to have undergone radiation or, if more advanced spread, chemotherapy.
Okay. And so you said when you were diagnosed, so is the protocol still very similar today?
Somewhat. So active surveillance is now the preferred gold standard. So
yay.
Miraculously, after all my bad decisions, I, made kind of a good one, even if it was based on just, like I said, maybe more laziness. Hey, I'm done. Let me get back to normal. If I can do that and just be followed up, that's what I'll do.
Well, and you said that it's a young man's disease, and I'm sure a lot of men, they may not even be thinking about whether or not they want to have kids. And I'm sure, radiation just makes that a lot more difficult. So I love the fact that active surveillance is the protocol now, because, if you have a 17-year-old who hasn't even gone to college yet, not even thinking about children, and has to go through 3 weeks of radiation, that could be, the end of that even option down the road.
Yeah. And, big kudos to my urologist. I lucked out, and he did procedures with a fertility specialist. And so that's one of the first things he brought up to me was, sperm banking or fertility preservation, and got me an appointment with the fertility doctor. 19 years ago, it wasn't as easy as it is today. But even now, those discussions are often overlooked.
Really? So a lot of times they don't even have those discussions?
Yeah, I mean, it's, the treatment team's thinking, hey, we have a, really treatable cancer here. Let's get moving and save the patient, not thinking, kind of save the soul as well, or the future. And it's understandable, and there's also, in that rush, maybe the physician doesn't think there's time, or the patient is asked, but they think, oh no, I want to start treatments right away. And unless you really have, organ system failure from advanced disease at presentation, there's always time to wait a few days, a week, 2 weeks to get in and preserve the fertility.
All right, so let's kind of shift gears a little bit. So you founded the Testicular Cancer Society. So tell us about what brought you to found that, and then kind of what the Testicular Cancer Society does.
Yeah, so, when I was diagnosed, there weren't a whole lot of resources for testicular cancer. There was a few, and they were kind of hard to find. And then, this was the advent of kind of all the bulletin board groups and the, Yahoo
before the internet and Facebook, right?
Yeah. I mean, I found help on MySpace back then. There was actually real people on there. Wow,
you're dating yourself.
Yeah. So I thought, well, what if I created an organization that was kind of like the hub of a wheel? And when people come into the hub because they're affected by the disease, I can point them in the right direction down the spoke to where the real help is. And then also learn from them and figure out what else is needed. And so that's basically, how the whole thing started. I thought I was kind of uniquely positioned as a healthcare professional and now as a, survivor experience, that maybe I can make a difference. And if, I did what I did, there's others out there doing it too. So how can I help, not have someone be like me? So that's really where it started. There were forums back then, for example, that were very helpful. About, 7 or 8 years ago, they were going to shut down. The people that started them it's kind of like it was founded by a survivor and his buddy, and they got tired of it. So, the Testicular Cancer Society took over kind of custodialship of those and run those to this day. There's, almost now a couple of decades of real life, real world survivor experience on there, which is invaluable. Obviously awareness is big for us because, the earlier disease detected, the less treatment burdens, the higher survival rate. So that's a big part. And we, have kind of created some strategic partners to help us with that. Manscaped's one, for example, who, reaches out and has their influencers send the message. And so it spreads a lot further than anyone would listen to us, which is wonderful. But then probably our biggest asset is helping people one-on-one. We're able to take you and as pieces of information come through, kind of make sure you understand everything, what's going to happen, what to expect, what to ask your doctor. And then, if it's a situation where you need high level expertise, we're friends with most of the top testicular cancer doctors in the world and can get that for you and do that. From even Australia, we can get a hold of one of the specialists down there and say, hey, what can we do to try to get this patient in? So
you kind of have like three main spokes to this, right? Just awareness, and then like access to resources, and then quality of care.
Yeah. So basically three columns, if you think. So, increasing awareness, increasing access to care, increasing quality of care. And then if you go across the columns, that includes the normal healthy population that just needs to know to do a self-exam. Then you have those that are kind of worried and to help through and then help those through diagnosis and survivorship. And we help the caregivers as well. Probably if I had to put a hard number, it probably would be 60% of the people we help aren't the actual person diagnosed. It's the caregiver around them, which I think says something probably more towards men's health than anything. But yeah, it's
because it's usually women are the caregivers, right?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So we spend a lot of times with, wives, sisters, girlfriends, grandmas, aunts, and a lot of times that guy isn't the one that even gets in contact with us, which is fine as long as they get what they need.
Right.
We're happy.
Okay. And I'm assuming you're like, are you still kind of hubbed in Cincinnati, or do you have, I guess, other satellite, groups or people, or are you still pretty much just one hub?
Yeah, well, physically we don't exist, so there is no bricks and mortar.
Okay.
So basically, we're
Well,
in,
you're here, so you
yeah,
exist.
yeah. We're wherever the internet is. I mean, things have transitioned so much, even just in the 19 years. We used to have brochures and box them up and mail them out. It's rare that we even get a brochure request anymore. And I don't think it's because of a lack of interest. I think just
Right.
because everything has moved more digitally. And we learned a valuable lesson years ago. There was a nursing student at Rutgers, I believe it was, and we sent her brochures, little trifolds, and then also little business cards that just had how to do self-exam on the back. And she got back to us. She was tabling at the university and got back to us and said, it's so funny. Like, the guys will come over and take one of the business cards and stick it in their pocket, but they won't touch any of the brochures. And so that kind of gave us the idea of, yeah, maybe people really aren't using brochures. And so we developed a mobile app that can be downloaded. And that way the information's in everybody's pocket, and a lot easier.
And it's also more private. Not like you're walking around with a big brochure about, hey, let's check for testicular cancer, right?
Yeah, well, and it saves on postage. I mean, it's been downloaded in over 152 countries. So, that's a lot of mailing fees if we had to mail brochures. So,
And airmail to get it to the other countries too.
yeah.
Okay, well, I'm going to put the information, if you can send it to me, that I can put the information on, on the app and how to download it. Cause this is a really big deal for young men. Like I know all cancers are on the rise, but is testicular cancer on the rise? Is it, like, where does it fit in as far as the prevalence in at least our country?
Yeah, so it has been, on the rise for decades. About 1 in 250 guys will be diagnosed at some point in their life with testicular cancer.
Okay.
The great news is only about 1 in 5,000 guys will die from testicular cancer. Um, I don't personally, I don't really care what disease I might get as long as I'm not going to pass away from it. So that is good news. It was completely different. I mean, the year I was born, the survival rate for metastatic disease was 5%. And so it completely switched to, by the time the year I was diagnosed, the overall survival rate was 95%. The
Wow.
mortality was 5%. And so, lucky to be born, and I guess the decade you are sometimes. Had it been earlier, it would be a different story.
Yeah, absolutely. So you said there's two different kinds. So the one that you had was much more slow growing, and then I'm assuming there's another more aggressive form as well.
The vast majority of testis cancers are germ cells, and that's kind of split into two bigger categories: a seminoma or a non-seminoma. And then there's some intricacies within non-seminoma, but that's usually how they break it down for the vast majority of cases, is seminoma or non-seminoma. And they have a little bit of biological differences. Seminoma respond to radiation therapy, for example, and non-seminomas don't. There's a type of non-seminoma that doesn't respond to chemotherapy. So there are some subtle differences, but most of the time the treatments are pretty similar.
Okay. All right. Are the survival rates similar as well?
Yes. Once the disease spreads, you kind of do what's called a prognosis of advanced disease, and you break the situation down to good risk, intermediate risk, or poor risk. For seminoma, for example, there is no poor risk. So it's kind of you hear that, it's the better cancer. I don't know if better cancer is the right word ever, but, that tends to have a little bit better survival rate, or, less treatment burden. But both can be deadly. So, and the fact that 1 in 20 guys are still dying from the disease means there's still some work to be done.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's see what else we've got here. So you're a mentor angel with Immerman Angels. Talk to us a little bit about Immerman Angels. I've heard about it before, but can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so Immerman Angels is awesome. They're out of Chicago. It was founded by Johnny Immerman, who coincidentally is a testicular cancer survivor. I first met him at Livestrong Summit in 2008 in Columbus, Ohio. So it's been a little while. We've been buddies. But when he was going through things, he really wished there was someone there that could help him along, right? Like someone that's been in your shoes, has been through this situation. And so that's what Immerman Angels is. And so basically it teams up, someone that's newly diagnosed with someone that's been there before and gone through it. And they team up on a plethora of different data points. So, if you're a 22-year-old in college, or you're a 32-year-old with, 2 kids at home, they try to team you up almost with someone exactly like you. And they do that for not only the person diagnosed, but they also do it for caregivers. And it's invaluable. And when I was diagnosed, I remember going to the cancer center. They gave me a couple of brochures, which didn't make sense. One was on prostate cancer and the other was on self-esteem. And I'm like, well, I have testicular cancer and I think I'm pretty much fine. I don't need any kind of support group. I'm not going to go sit in a circle somewhere. Well, unbeknownst to me, that's kind of me being dumb back then as well. I reached out to MySpace, and if someone had a unique name, I would Google them and try to find an email address to ask them how they dealt with testicular cancer. So I was creating that support. I was just, I guess, too proud to admit that I was doing it. So that's really what I was seeking, was that, hey, you've been here before. What did you do? How did you make decisions? What was it like? And that's what Immerman Angels does.
Fabulous. And so I've talked to a couple of people who have had like cervical cancer, and for the female side, cervical cancer is kind of got this stigma of, we don't talk about it. We just kind of hide in the shadows and stuff. And, you and I've talked before that there is, again, that stigma on the male side for this. So when you talk about awareness and raising awareness, like how do you get through to people, but how do you work to combat that stigma that comes along with, reproductive cancers in general?
Yeah, it's tough. Quite a few years ago, we were looking to get into high schools and educate. The high school kids are of the age to get the disease. And I looked, and there was over 950 high schools in Cincinnati, or in Ohio. So that's a lot of schools. And then trying to get in was near impossible. We've teamed up with the breast cancer organization over the years in Connecticut, for example, and was kind of able to go in with them and do the education. But it's difficult. And I don't know why. There's still some kind of stigma surrounding it. I think kind of like we saw with breast cancer, 30, 40 years ago, where it just wasn't spoken of as much as it is now, or accepted. But yeah, the look on people's faces just when they hear testicular cancer, or when they try to say testicular cancer, it's just another body part. It's cancer. So
Right.
we have some work to do to get over that still.
Okay. Yeah, I think high schools would be really, really great. Although, can you share the story of the one high school that that you went into that we talked about, that they've followed you around when you were in there?
Yeah, so like I said, we teamed up with the breast cancer center up in Connecticut, and would go up and we lectured up there maybe 4 or 5 different years to the different high schools. And it was like the 3rd year, and we went to lunch, and I said something to one of the women from the breast cancer center. I said, "Don't you think it's weird that I have a chaperone?" And they're like, "What?" I'm like, "Well, you 2 girls get to walk around the hallways free, go wherever, talking about breast cancer, but I've had a chaperone, and this is 3 years in a row. Like they know me. Like they say, 'Hi, Mike.' But I don't want the chaperone going to the bathroom with me. So I wouldn't even go to the bathroom at the schools. I would wait until lunchtime. It's almost like I'm there to harm the kids because I'm talking about cancer.
Like you're going to be doing exams yourself,
Yeah, and that's fine. I understand it. It's high schools, but then everyone should have had chaperones in my mind. I'm not saying chaperones is a bad idea, but there was definitely a different treatment. And it's a shame. It's just, again, I think that's the stigma surrounding it. Several years later, because it's the same area, it reminds me, there was a newspaper out of Hartford, Connecticut, like a community newspaper, and the sports writer, just one column, decided to talk about testicular cancer. and, and how it's the, athletes on the field that get it, but it's not talked about. And, they should realize that when they're, raising money and walking around the track and all this other stuff. And I thought, wow, that's great. And so I kept an eye on the newspaper, social media. And then a week later wrote in a thing to the editor saying, your sports guy, I mean, he's spot on, because you never in any of your social media put his article out. You put all the other articles out. And so the editor ended up publishing it and putting that out. But it's crazy. Like, your own reporter's telling you that it's not talked about, and then you're not replicating the message anywhere.
Now, and I don't remember, so was Scott Hamilton also diagnosed with testicular cancer as well?
Yeah. So Scott Hamilton was, and he was treated at the Cleveland Clinic. So there's I think it's Scott Cares initiative. That's kind of how the whole Fourth Angel program started up at Cleveland Clinic, which is very similar to Emmerman Angels, the whole idea of, peer-to-peer mentorship.
Okay. And I mean, it's unfortunate, but in some ways it's beneficial if, somebody famous gets this and decides to be an advocate for it. It can at least, increase awareness. When you and I first talked last week, the first thing out of my mouth was, well, yeah, I know Lance Armstrong had it. So that was kind of the extent of the awareness that I really had about it. But I guess it's just one more tool if somebody, decides to be an advocate. And that's why I always push, get out there and share your story. It's one of the things that we do on this podcast, because the more we share, the more we become advocates for others and raise awareness that if you keep it inside, and I'm not telling anybody to, go shout it from the rooftops or not, it's just can be so beneficial to other people if you are sharing your experience, because it just raises more awareness.
Yeah, it's something that's not talked about a whole bunch. And part of it is thinking, well, someone wants to, but they just don't know that much about the disease, right? Mm-hmm. And so, well, if you say something, then people are going to ask you questions if you don't have the answer. I mean, that's one of the things we did with our mobile app. It's not difficult. We sophomorically tell people to go to ballchecker.com, because young kids will type in ballchecker.com into the URL.
Of course they will.
That's all you have to do. Hey, have you seen this app? You should go to ballchecker.com. It's something that simple. We used to have what we called the ball team, which was bringing awareness to the local level. And really,
I love that.
Yeah, your area better, and how can you get an awareness message out? And likewise, I would say kids, but let's say your son better than we do. Is your son the one that will take a message about testicular cancer awareness that's funny? Or does it have to be serious and scary? Or do you have to keep doing it and tapping them in the forehead until they get it? I was once a young man. I remember my pediatrician, I don't share this a lot, but I'd gone in for a hemorrhoid and didn't know what it was, except, whoa, what's that going on? And walked out. I was 16 or 17. I was driving, and the pediatrician told me in the office that I was getting to the age where I needed to check myself, meaning do testicular self-exams. And, I laughed all the way out into the car saying, oh my God, my doctor said I should touch myself. So, thankful my doctor shared that message. Most survivors that I talked to, their pediatricians didn't. But unfortunately, the message didn't stick. And so that's why it's important for individual voices. They're going to listen to you, for example. Your friends and family and loved ones are going to listen to you more than they're going to listen to me.
Right. Yeah, and I've had several people share, and I'll ask you the question in a minute. I ask all my guests, what's one piece of advice that you would give to someone who's just starting out on this journey? And I've had several people, they're like, stay away from Google. Because you start down the Google rabbit hole and you're dead, in 3 days because of everything that's there. And Google can be very beneficial. It can also be very detrimental depending on, on what you're finding. So, do you have any specific resources or places that people can go to find out more information that's not gonna oh my gosh, I'm gonna die in, 3 days?
Yeah, I mean, our main website goes over cancer pretty well,
Okay.
and points out some different resources to go to. Our forums are pretty good. There's some good Facebook groups. There's even a subreddit, which is good. Again,
Those
it's
can be rabbit
amazing.
holes too, though.
What's that?
Those can be rabbit holes too, those subreddits.
Yeah, yeah. The testicular cancer one, so it's just the testicular cancer subreddit is actually really good. I mean, there's
Okay.
physicians on there that have been patients as well. I've been really impressed by it. I think when you look at some of the Facebook groups, it's a little more of the Wild West, where you'll ask a question and the answer will go this way.
Yeah.
I try to keep an eye on all that and make sure that the question or the answer the person should have is received. Our forums, is older technology. They've been around for years. There's a lot of information on there. They're not as active as they used to be. But the biggest thing is if you're going through it, get a hold of us. When you're first diagnosed, you're most of the time overwhelmed and unable to cope, and we can give proper perspective and hope.
And what is the website for your organization?
Testicularcancersociety.org.
Okay. That's pretty easy to remember, but we'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, we try to make it as long as possible.
But at least it's easy to remember.
Yeah.
It's the name of the organization. It is the website as well.
Yes.
Okay. All right. So now I'm going to ask you the question. So you come across somebody who's just been diagnosed or is in that state of overwhelm, not really sure what to do first, what to do next. What is one piece of advice that you would give to somebody starting on this journey?
I think the biggest one is relax. I think we get so far ahead of ourselves. We get it all the time. Someone feels a lump. Okay, now they're wondering what chemotherapy is, what surgery is, what life expectancy is, what their fertility is. They're so far down the road when it's just relax. You need to get in and get an ultrasound done. That's the first step, and then when you get to that ultrasound step, let's go to the next one. When I was diagnosed, I stayed pretty quiet. And my sister was doing a progressive dinner. She lived up in South Carolina, and my dad encouraged me to call her because just in case, I wasn't going to say anything until after surgery. My mom and dad knew I was going to have surgery. He said, well, what if she finds out and then she's going to be hurt? So I called her. Hey, what are you doing? Progressive dinner. Okay, it's where you go house to house for different courses. And so I told her I was having surgery on Monday, and she walked into the next house and her eyes are red for tears. And one of her girlfriend goes, what did you do to her? My brother-in-law, what did you do to Maggie? And Maggie's like, nothing. It's my brother. He has cancer. But she had a short cry in the car, and she thought, I can't get all upset and stressed right now. I mean, a short cry is understandable. And she said, I figured that I would save all that until I was told I had to worry. And that's one of the big things I think is, we fill ourselves with worry. But a lot of times it's just wasteful energy and stress. But it's going to be needed because when the doctors say you got something to worry about, you're going to need that. So that's easier said than done, but that's kind of the big thing. Relax, take things as they come.
I love that. One step at a time.
Yeah.
I love there's an old proverb or something that says, worry doesn't change tomorrow. It just takes away the blessings of today.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
there's
I love that.
a SEAL team guy that, you say, take one day at a time. And when he was going through BUDS, he said, I just would take one meal at a time. If I could get to the next meal, then I'm okay. And then let me get to the next meal. But I think that stepwise approach is good.
Perfect. All right. And now where can people get a hold of you? Can they just contact you through the Testicular Cancer Society website, or is there another way people can get a hold of you if they want just to chat or more information?
Yeah, I mean, the best way to get a hold of us is through the website. Okay. We have contact form, our emails are on there, our WhatsApp, our social media. We're basically answering messages all over the place. So that's one thing is it's not hard to find us. You can text us, call us.
And the app is at ballchecker.com?
Yeah. So ballchecker.com it'll redirect to our page on self-exams where the links to the App Store and Google Play are.
Okay,
But it's a
perfect.
free app. It's nothing. There's no sign in. We don't, try to trick you in. We're going to push messages to you saying to donate. It literally is how to do a self-exam, how you can set a monthly reminder, and then you can contact us in there. We even incorporated WhatsApp into it, so people globally didn't have to worry about long distance. They could reach out and say, "Hey, I have a question after my self-exam."
Oh, that's fantastic. Love that. Make it as easy as possible, right?
We try.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Mike. This was so informative. And I just, the more we can get the word out there about these things, the more people can be saved, which is kind of the final goal. If we can't eradicate cancer, at least we can save as many lives as possible.
Absolutely. That's the key. Thank you so much for having me. And, certainly thank you to everyone for listening.
Absolutely. All right. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye bye.